right, everyone, thank you for coming, and I just want to welcome you to the event here at Startup Grind Monterey Bay, and wanted to welcome Tim Bucher to Startup Grind Monterey Bay. Great.
How are you?
Good. Got some hard questions for you today.
All right.
So I think just kind of want to start with the history of how you became an entrepreneur.
That's a big question. Because I don't think anybody knows how they became an entrepreneur, but I can start off with sort of my upbringing because I think that did influence it a lot. So I was actually raised a farmer. I was born and raised a farmer, a dairy farmer at that, from parents who had immigrated over from Europe. And so the whole family, had to basically work together and work hard to survive. And I think that gave me a little bit of my entrepreneurial spirit, if you will.
Okay, and was there anything when you were growing up that kind of made you want to go start your own business, or was there just something where it just kind of was in you?
I think growing up in an environment like that, where you see your parents run their own business, the only thing I knew was to start my own business. And so it was always part of my plan. I didn't know when, but I knew I wanted to do that from a very, very young age, and actually did it at a very young age. I used to start all kinds of other businesses when I was a kid in high school and whatnot.
Can you go into some of those? Do you have any that you remember that were kind of stood out?
Yeah, two of them in particular. So I would do, my normal chores on the farm and work, like all kids back then, 60 hours a day or whatever it was. It was crazy. My brother and I, we used to hate summer vacation because we would have to work harder during summer vacation, right? But that work ethic definitely helped with my startup career. But there were two things that I did. One, when I was in high school, they were both in high school, I started a DJ company with two friends. And, it was just supposed to be for our own high school, but it ended up being a pretty big operation that we ran throughout Northern California. And we made some really good money. The other business, when I was 16, I actually had some money saved up, and I bought a 2-acre vineyard and started to make wine at a very young age.
Wow.
So
European.
Exactly.
Very nice. It's interesting that one of our past speakers, who also grew a very large company, also had a DJ company as well.
Really?
Seems to be a theme here with the entrepreneurs.
Yeah, I have to tell you guys, I actually still have all of my equipment. Not the original equipment. The original equipment I actually built myself. So the amplifiers, I actually built myself. And the speakers, some of them I built myself.
And a lot of people can do
that. I don't think I could do it today, but I did it back then, and it was just a ton of fun, and I was so passionate about it. And so I was the tech guy out of the three of us. And I also had a truck, which was really important in that business.
Very true, very true.
Yeah.
Where were you raised?
I was raised in a small town called Healdsburg in Northern California. When I was born, it was very much an ag town. It's grown up quite a bit. I think today it probably has something like 10 or 11,000 people, still quite small, but it's a little more upscale than it used to be back then. And when I was growing up, it was basically prunes and grapes and dairy farms. And today it's mostly grapes and fancy shops.
And what brought you towards Silicon Valley?
That was an accident in two ways. Actually, it was two accidents, to be honest with you. The first accident occurred when I was in college. Growing up in the agricultural community and being very, very interested and passionate about farming, I wanted to go to a university called UC Davis. Okay, it's probably the #1 ag school in the country. And I got accepted, and I had a knack for the sciences. So I knew that I wanted to couple agriculture with sciences, but I didn't know how you could do that. So the counselor said, well, there's this thing called ag engineering. I didn't know what the word engineering meant. And but I really wanted to basically, go there for agricultural purposes. So your freshman year in college, you have to take kind of the basics in engineering. You take some mechanical engineering, you take some civil engineering, and then you had to take this thing called programming. It wasn't even called computer science when I was there. It was called computer engineering. And normal freshmen took it, computer engineering, then mechanical, and then civil, or whatever the normal sequence was. But I was so afraid of computers or anything that had the word, engineering even in it, that I changed my schedule so that I took it at the end of my freshman year. And it was a big auditorium. I'll never forget this. It was called Chem 194. That's the name of the auditorium, 500-person auditorium. And I was probably second to the last row because I was scared. And I could barely see the professor, and he started talking about this thing called Fortran. It was a programming language that isn't really used very much anymore. IBM might use it somewhere. I don't know.
Possible.
No, I don't think so. But as the professor was speaking, I was going, wait a minute, I understand this. Wait, I really understand this. And by the end of that quarter, I was actually teaching that class up in front. So I knew that I found something that I really loved. And I changed my major from agriculture to computer engineering and electrical engineering, because that's all that the university had at the time. And I didn't tell my parents until graduation.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Yeah.
How did they take it?
So my father, it came up to me during the graduation ceremony, after the graduation ceremony, and all he asked me was, so you're not coming back to the farm? And I said no. But I was also the youngest male, so I knew I really couldn't. So I had to kind of find my own way. And I did. And so that was the first mistake. And then the second mistake was, at that time, I mentioned a company, IBM. IBM was kind of the hottest company to work for. And I was very fortunate to get a job offer from IBM. And I was like, wow, this is it. And then a friend of a friend of a friend, long story how it happened, said, hey, my fiance is working at this startup company. It's in Mountain View, or wherever it was at the time. And why don't you go and talk to her? So I did, and the startup company, this is back in the 80s, mind you, was called Sun Microsystems.
Small company.
And it was back then. That was actually my first startup.
Wow.
And so I declined the IBM offer, and I took this other offer, and I remember all my friends were saying, what? You're going to work for who? I've never heard of that. You had a job offer from IBM. And I took less money than what IBM offered. And I remember, this is the funniest thing, because today we all know about stock options and, stock and all this stuff, right? They offered me stock options. I had no idea what that was. I just thought, oh, well, that's something that you might get an option. Yeah, whatever. I don't know what it was. But it was so funny. And I think it was maybe 3 months into my tenure that I actually sat down with my boss and asked him, what are stock options? But that worked out okay. That's how I got to Silicon Valley.
That's how you got to Silicon Valley. And can you tell us some of the other Silicon Valley companies that you've been able to work for or with?
Yeah, so I've actually, I'm currently on, I just realized this, I'm on my 8th startup. I've been in Silicon Valley, this is my 29th year. So next year I celebrate 3 decades. I joke sometimes with my colleagues and I say I'm the oldest entrepreneur in Silicon Valley. There might be some truth to that. But I love building new things. I love building from nothing, building something. So after Sun, I joined Steve Jobs at a small startup called Next Computer. Um, and that was one heck of a ride. And the reason why it was one heck of a ride was it was a very small company, and I got to do everything from, you know, working on what we call Next Step OS, which has become Mac OS now, or OS 10, OS X, and to silicon design, to system design, even working on robots in the factory. It was awesome because it was still very young in my career, and having that breadth, I didn't know it at the time, but I learned later that was really, really good for me. Really good for an entrepreneur to get a lot of breadth as opposed to going really deep or too deep too early. If that makes sense.
Yeah,
Um,
of course.
so I did Next Computer with Steve Jobs. Then I joined a gentleman named Trip Hawkins, who was the founder of Electronic Arts, and we did a gaming company called the 3DO Company. And back in my college days, you would always find me at the arcade. Okay, I was like, half of my money went to tuition, half of my money went to the arcade. I swear, it was like I was addicted. So when I had the opportunity to join Trip, it was like, oh my God, this is a dream come true. And that was a ton of fun. And we took that company public in '94, I think it was. And then I had the itch for another startup. I did Web TV, which was a company that got acquired by Microsoft.
We used that as well.
Yeah,
I remember
and I had the honor of working for Bill Gates directly for a couple of those 5 years. Spent a lot of time with Steve Ballmer as well, and it was really interesting to see how Steve Jobs and Bill Gates and Steve Ballmer and Trip Hawkins, how they led. It was really, and at Sun, Scott McNeely and Vinod Khosla and Andy Bechtolsheim, Bill Joy, guys that to this day I just admire because of what I learned from them and how they led. And then let's see, after that, it's kind of a long story, so
Yes.
sorry, Pete.
Take your time.
This is why I call myself a diseased entrepreneur. But after the 3DO company, then I did Web TV, worked for Microsoft for a while, and then I did a startup called Espiri, but later it was called Mira. That was kind of venturing out for the first time completely on my own, no co-founders or anything like that. Ended up selling that company to Seagate. And then I did.
What was it by the way? What was that company? What was the?
It was basically before cloud was like cloud. The idea was to manage devices through a cloud service, but not store everything in the cloud, but really store the metadata, which was the intelligent part, or which you could make the intelligent part, and then tell an ecosystem of devices how to play nice with one another.
Oh, okay.
And ironically, it's technology that my current company licensed, and we'll get there later.
Okay.
Yeah. Sometimes you can be too ahead of your time.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I've never heard of that before.
Yeah, I guess that's better than being too late for your time. So that is interesting.
I've never heard that before. Built a technology, sold it, and then had to license it for your new.
Several years later, many years later. Yeah. But then I joined Steve Jobs for the second tour of duty with him, and first non-startup I did, which was working for Apple, and I ended up running the Mac division in the end at Apple. But then the startup disease kicked in. Started a company called Zing. It was a mobile entertainment platform, and ended up selling that to Dell, and I worked for Michael Dell for a few years. Then I did an e-commerce company, and now I'm on my, like I said, 8th company.
Wow, it's a lot.
So,
quite a bit.
well, when you're the oldest entrepreneur in Silicon Valley, you can do a lot of companies.
Is there anything in these startups, if you can remember back, where you might have hit a roadblock, where you came into something, and what was that, if you can remember it, and how did you get over the hump, basically?
So I actually believe that's the best question you can ask And I believe the answer to any successful startup is that they have at least one major roadblock, because that's when you're really tested, really tested. And so every single venture I've done, there have been roadblocks, but there were two really big ones. One really, really big one that's kind of interesting. And I think every entrepreneur finds himself in this situation at times. One of the biggest challenges in any startup, as I'm sure you've heard, you've spoken about, others have spoken about it, is raising money, right?
Very hard.
First of all, everyone comes up with great ideas, right? The thing that makes entrepreneurs different is that they take action on their ideas. And that action can be both building it as well as raising money to then make it an ongoing concern, a small or a big company, either way. And there was one company I mentioned, Esperi. And this was kind of unique, where I was out raising money from venture capitalists, and had ended up getting 3 term sheets, which means 3 VCs wanted to lead the deal. This was a series A. So I had done essentially an angel round, a bridge round, and this was the official Series A. I won't mention which VC, but there was this one VC that in Silicon Valley, great VC, and they all were great, by the way, the three offers. And I chose one. And I remember specifically there was this fancy restaurant in downtown Palo Alto where they invited me on Friday when I signed for, this is no joke, this is a long time ago, and I remember this specifically, for champagne and caviar. That was Friday. And then on Monday, I got a call to say, can you come over? No problem. They said, can you cut your marketing spend? And I'm like, but that's really important, right? Yeah, can you cut this too? Can you cut this? And I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. And anyway, it turns out that the fund, they had their partner meeting on that Monday and they were in trouble. And so they were pulling back term sheets. Oh. This is the only time this has happened, but it's pretty brutal, right? Because when you then say to the others that you're going to go with this other one, they will either say, okay, I'll follow, or I don't want to work with that firm, and see you later. And that's essentially what happened. Was like, well, these were all 3 big firms and they all wanted to be the lead. And so they said, okay, fine, so go and syndicate that, rock and roll. But here's the tough part. This occurred in December, I forget what year. And we were running out of money. And this term sheet involved some fuel. And so one of the toughest things I had to do was to lay off half the company on Christmas Eve. That was tough. That was tough. And I didn't think this company was going to make it. But then a miracle of sorts happened in January, February. And an investor just fell in love with it and basically took it under his wings. And then we got an even bigger VC on board than the 3 original ones, and. So, but it really did test the team. It certainly tested me. And it really tested the company. And I think that those moments, I hope, no startup has to go through something that severe, but those blocks, what do you call them, those roadblocks?
Like roadblocks or speed bumps,
speed bumps. I think they're really, really important, which sounds kind of sick, but if you're just cruising along, I don't think you're going to be as sharp as when you're having to navigate up, down, and around those roadblocks.
Yeah.
So don't sit there and go, okay, I got to figure out a roadblock here, right? But know when it comes, because they will come, that you have to get through it. And you get through it with your team, you get through it with your talents, you get through it with just sheer guts. I think that's really what it comes down to, is the team and guts are the most important.
Okay. Um, kind of, I guess, playing off the team aspect. In startups, I think a lot of times startups, it's a single person comes up with an idea and they start trying to find a team. Um, what was one of the better teams that you worked on
Hmm.
or
I've been
with?
very fortunate. I mean, there's been some great teams. You know how you love all your children. Um, I think there was a company. Honestly, that's a really hard question. That's a really hard question because it's very unique. There are certain traits that the the really great teams had in several of these startups that I've been involved with. Um, I would say that Zing was an amazing team, and one of the reasons why it was pretty amazing is we were a very diverse set of things that we were working on, and we moved very fast. Um, there was no siloing. Really important when you are doing quite a few different things. It's really important that everyone works horizontally in addition to vertically within their own responsibilities. But that's a tough call to say which team was the best. Don't ask me that question.
It's fair enough. So tell us about Live, your latest venture, and
Yeah.
how did the idea come about to create it? Where is it now? Where is it going? Kind of multi-part question.
Well, I told you about that licensing thing, and so I always tell people I've actually been working on it for, you know, 12 years. Um, I'm very, very, very maniacally passionate about data. And, data is not just in and of itself, right? It's sort of big chunks of information with little chunks of information that kind of describe that information. And I had, I've always been thinking about sort of what are the brains, what's the kind of information you need to make very important decisions about other data. Because when it comes down to it, when you think about technology, what's the most important invention in technology in history? This is according to Tim, so my opinion.
Okay.
It doesn't mean much, um, but I think the most valuable invention in technology is data. When it comes down to it, right? Whether you're doing drones or whether you're doing storage or anything, it's all about data, and that's tremendous value. So how can you take that value and make it more intelligent? How can you make data intelligent? And that's what I was doing with this company called Mira. And then I started to think maybe 5 years ago, when you think about the smartphone permeation worldwide now, which is kind of cool, really less than a decade.
Yeah.
Actually, some of the IP back in the Mira days talked about camera phones. Remember camera phones? It was like,
They were, I think, invented here in Santa Cruz by Philippe Kahn.
there you go, right? So once camera phones hit, that's actually when this whole concept sort of came up. I'm like, okay, wait a minute. It's a phone that you'll always have with you, but you can also take pictures and videos, etc. And when you think about what smartphones have evolved to, they're basically mobile computers, but they also capture life memories better than any device in history.
I rarely use my DSLR anymore.
Me too.
16 megapixels in my pocket.
Boom, right?
Can't beat that.
I've got Android, I've got iOS, and the big differentiator a lot of them kind of fight with is their camera technology. And it was years ago when I realized, okay, if you're going to try to make data really smart, what's the most valuable data to consumers today? And it's life memories. Like if you lost, the spreadsheets that you're working on, if you lost, a Word document, let's say you're a writer, yeah, it sucks, but you could recreate it. But if you lose those life memories, like many people do, unfortunately, that would really suck. And when I thought back in the old days, like 20 years ago, and I asked, well, what was the company that was really taking care of life memories? If I asked you 20 years ago, I don't know,
Kodak.
boom,
That's
right? Kodak. Of course, when I'm in Japan, I say Fujifilm. But there was really only a handful, maybe Polaroid in there too. Only a handful of companies, but typically people would say the same company when you would ask that question. Whereas today, if I asked everybody in this room, who do you trust with your life memories? If there were 100 people in this room, you would get 100 answers. Okay. And I said, well, wait a minute. What if you applied this metadata technology to life memories, in particular to this explosion of content that we are capturing with these smartphones? Because the average consumer isn't really managing that very well, okay, if at all. And so that was, it's a long story, but but that's the genesis of I wanted to create a company that could actually help consumers and actually be maniacally focused on life memories to the point where, over time, it could be the Kodak of the digital era. I mean, the positive side of Kodak.
Yeah.
Right.
And I got in stock at the wrong time on that.
You got on downhill? Yeah.
Right before.
Got it. Well, so when I thought about film, I said, well, what is film today? What's the analog of film? And it's really software. It's really applications. Okay, so what if you could create a suite of applications that ran on pretty much every platform that you might want to capture, or that you might be capturing, or you might want to view life memories? And that's what we set out to do. And we launched in October of last year a free set of applications that you can get for all the common platforms. And what Lyve software as service does is it really finds all your life memories, whether it's on a flash drive or whether it's on a Windows machine or a Mac or an Android phone or an iOS device or anything, and it indexes your life memories. So it doesn't just like copy stuff, because that's kind of the easy thing to do. And then you end up with all kinds of duplications and everything. Yeah. But what if you could actually find more metadata? Yeah. What if you could actually find essentially a fingerprint of that video, the DNA of that video or the DNA of that photo? And so we created some technology to do that.
Oh, wow.
And in a sense, that's the main thing that we store in our service, is the master index of your life. And then, as I was saying earlier about that other company many years ago, the service then tells the devices that you already have how to play nice with one another and how to also take mobile versions, because that's really where we do most of our viewing. Yeah. Actually, if not all. A lot of people tell me, oh, well, I view my pictures on my computer. I'm like, yeah, right. You might do 0.01% of the time, you might do it there, but it's really on your smartphones. How many times have people said,
yeah, most
hey,
people
Pete,
are going
look
like
at this,
that.
right? Exactly. Right. And the going like this, how many times have people said, oh, it's here somewhere, yeah. Right? Or how many times have people said, oh yeah, that's not on my phone. I offloaded that and it's on my machine. What if you had everything always with you? And that's the other thing that Lyve does. So it collects all of your life memories, it indexes them, it deduplicates it, and then it does controlled duplication based upon the kinds of storage that it finds that you would have in your life. But first and foremost, it brings you a mobile view of all of that to your smartphone. So like I have a 16 gigabyte iPhone 6, I have a 32 gigabyte Android S6, and I have about 70,000 photos and about 3,000 videos. It only takes up about 3 gig. But when I go and look at the picture, it will actually go and fetch the high resolution from someplace in the ecosystem. But I don't even know that.
And does it store the file where it was originally taken at the full size?
Yeah, and then there's 2 ways that you can do it. You can get external USB drives, and you can turn them into Lyve drives in our desktop application. So, or if you run on your laptop and you have these in there. So let's say you buy a 2 terabyte drive for $99. plug it in, you turn into a live drive. Now, as I'm taking pictures in the field, all the originals will go off the phone. The mobile version will stay there, but the original will be on that drive. Or you can use it with G Drive, you can use it with Dropbox, you can use it with OneDrive. It's about giving the consumer choice of the kind of storage that they want to use, because not everyone's comfortable with devices, not everyone's comfortable with clouds. And when you think globally, like we just launched we're in about 200 countries now. So we localized it, and there's this one checkbox in the app stores. It says WW, that means worldwide. And we just checked that box a couple weeks ago. It's a pretty exciting checkbox to make. But when you think globally, you have to give consumers choice, because certain cultures don't put anything in the cloud. So, okay, give them a device-based solution for their precious memories. Whereas other cultures, I would say the United States is one of them. You know, wahoo, let's put it in the cloud.
Yeah.
So then you can bring your cloud solution along. But the management software is Lyve.
Yeah, I try. My dad actually has one, and I try to explain to people who see it. It's like a photo book for, you know, back in the day, you bring out the photo books and be going through your photos of your family, but now you can sit on your couch with an iPad or your cell phone and look at your TV and have the photos really big on your TV. Because you guys have the smart app as well for the TVs.
Right. So we work with Vizio TVs, we work with Chromecast. Chromecast is kind of nice because you can sit there. You do this thing called social casting. So normally you can only cast, one person can cast to a Chromecast device. But if we were at a party together, you could cast a photo, and then I could cast a photo, and we can have like dueling casting going on.
Oh, cool.
It's kind of fun. That's really cool. And then this new feature that we just announced, which is kind of the direction that we're really taking in the whole company. When you think about life memories, if you were to like draw a histogram of when you take more photos and videos, there would be these spikes around things called events, right? I mean, think about it. Whether it's a birthday party or a concert or anything in between,
There's going to be an increase in the amount of photos taken.
boom, there's a spike there. So we were actually, when we first launched, we started to get feedback from our customers immediately saying, hey, could you come up with something better for events? And we created this feature called a mix, which, you know how at events right now, you hashtag it.
Yeah.
And so you hashtag, and then you got to wait for it to upload. And then if you want to actually download the hashtags, you actually can't. Or if you can, with certain social networks, you get a low-res version.
Yeah.
Wouldn't it be cool if like we could just create a mix, and it would be a public beacon, or it could be private, and then everybody, no matter what platform, Android, iOS, etc., could join that mix, and then everybody is doing collaborative user-generated content at events.
Wow. That'd be pretty big.
Yeah. So we tested that in Austin, Texas, at South by Southwest at, I don't know, maybe 40 concerts. It was awesome.
And it went well?
It went incredibly well. So well that we launched it. We launched that feature in May.
Cool.
Yeah. So now you can create a mix. So if any of you want to create a mix, and then others can join the mix no matter what, then when you walk away from the event, you get all the photos from that event.
From everything.
And videos are coming soon, but right now it's just photos. But you know, how many times have you been at an event where it's like, hey Pete, I saw you take a lot of pictures. Yeah. Send me those pictures.
Yeah, text them to me or something.
Text them to me.
Okay, that's it. Well, I shot it at 4K, so that's a pretty big file. Got this much,
Right.
gigs a month.
Right. And Lyve takes care of all that plumbing and makes sure it gets from your phone to my phone or to my PC, and I don't have to worry about it.
That's great.
And I can also keep all the originals in the high resolution that you took. Like we see the mix, and we get to see the mobile version of all the photos, and then I can go, oh, you know what? I really like this picture Pete took, and that picture, and this picture, and this picture. And then I hit the download, and then I get the high res from you, but you don't even know it, into my Lyve account. And now it's part, and I can put in my camera roll, I can edit it, I can do everything.
Oh, wow. That's
Yeah.
really cool. And so, where do you see Lyve going beyond that? Where do you also see, since it is kind of cloud-based, and I totally understand how different cultures have different kind of ways they want to store things, but where do you see it going in the future, like the next 5-10 years, with not only Lyve, but also with the cloud in general or the Internet of
Yeah.
Things? Because
Yeah.
a lot of it's kind of different names, very
Yep.
similar.
Well, I believe that everything is going to the cloud at some point in time. So when it comes to, as a matter of fact, a month ago, I announced that we have a Lyve cloud solution that we'll be launching this fall. So if you don't want to use your Google stuff, if you don't want to use your Microsoft stuff, etc., you can use Lyve stuff. And it's just another option, though, because it's about choice. But I don't believe that there will be physical storage devices. There will still be physical capture devices, but I think that's where the most exciting opportunity lies for what's happening in today's world, right? And this is also where, when I think about startup companies, a little while ago, Pete and I were talking about some drones that we have, and I use it for capture. And there's new kinds of capture devices too that you could imagine, like when those events occur. I announced a new device that will be coming out soon. I'll say exactly when, but I showed it, and it worked. Where imagine if you take the camera from your smartphone and if you could just put one over there and put one over there and put one over there, and then you don't have to experience the event through your smartphone. They could automatically capture the event, right? So, whether it's mini drones, whether it's just multi-angles, and then the ability to stitch all that together, because today, stitching together content that's being shot on multiple GoPro cameras or whatever,
It's very time consuming.
it's very time consuming. So, and video editing in general is very time consuming, but there's a lot of things you can do with video that involves metadata that can aid in the editing. Okay. I like metadata a lot.
Well, Adobe released with the new CS version, that's strictly for media ingest
Yep.
with metadata.
Yep. Yep.
Just one tool for
Yep.
just that.
And there's new cameras that are going to have additional telemetry on them that can guide the software better. So for example, smartphones can actually do it today, but no one's doing it. If you use the application, if you use the camera in the Lyve app, we don't tell people this, but one of the things that we're doing is we're actually capturing and embedding in the video all the telemetry that the smartphone gives us.
Oh, cool.
And so, Android and iOS gives you like the accelerometers, the compasses, all this stuff. And if you embed that, then you can actually do some post-processing very easy. For example, if I'm, capturing you and then I move the camera over to you, the accelerometers say that's a blur, and so the software can automatically take that out.
Wow.
Right? So when I think about the next 5 years, I think you're going to see some incredible innovations around capturing and editing, to be blunt.
Yeah.
And storage is all going to be in the cloud, right? And the cloud, it's not just storage though. There's a lot of computing that you can do to augment even more metadata. And this is where the future of media is going, right? Because when you think about the most powerful information about you, it's not in what you surf online. It's actually what you do in life. And if you're capturing that, you can figure out a lot about you.
Will you guys ever have one of those 3D cameras?
We are format agnostic. We're storage type agnostic. There's certain things that we are agnostic about. The thing we're not agnostic about is as much metadata as possible from that capture device,
Okay.
right?
So if you've got an array of cameras, that's a lot of metadata.
Yeah. Well, you can actually, it's a lot of data, but then there's a lot of additional information that you can garner from each individual camera. And then if you start to go inside the video, then you can even extract a lot of metadata as well. Oh, that's a sunset. You're on the beach. Wow, you're on the beach all the time, Pete. Oh, you must like, the beach.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes, that's very true.
Whereas you might not surf all the time, like, how's the weather in the beach, or
Yeah.
What's the surf conditions like, or whatever. I don't know if you're a surfer, but I'm just making that up.
Used to be.
Used to be. Okay.
In the computers. So do you think there'll ever be a cloud in the cloud?
Whoa, that's pretty cool. Um, I think the cloud has so much opportunity in and of itself that trying to take it to another abstraction layer, other than with metadata, is I think there's some we have so much meat to chew on by just the transition that's occurring now.
Yeah.
And we it's an exciting time for sure, because you mentioned also IoT, and that's the other thing that the cloud is also empowering, because that one company I was telling you about 12 years ago was a little bit ahead of its time, right? Because it was basically managing an Internet of Things ecosystem through metadata. But we never called it those things.
Yeah.
And it was a little too early. But now, time is right. You're seeing companies doing this. It's exploding everywhere around us. I ran out of IP addresses in my house recently. And I was like, whoa.
That's a lot of devices.
It's actually, the router was set to only 99, but it was 99 devices. But then I realized I couldn't run out of, I have 3 kids and they all have like 3 devices, and I have thermostats and printers and weather stations. And I went, oh my God, what's happening?
Yeah.
And, set-top boxes, and they're all connected. Everything's connected. So there's so much opportunity to chew on that I think trying to abstract the cloud to yet another layer is a ways out.
I know you're obviously in Lyve right now, but do you see anything after Lyve? I mean, it seems like you just can't stop being an entrepreneur. So
the answer is, yeah. I have a whole list of things. It's like I have a real bucket list, like a human bucket list, and I kind of have a company bucket list. And I don't know if these are worthy of companyness, because that's really the fun of being an entrepreneur. Is, again, everybody has ideas. It's a matter of refining those ideas and taking action on them. And for now, I'm not taking action on any other ideas other than some of the other stuff that I do with family and friends, of course. Yeah, I mean, I think a lot about interesting ideas. I love working with entrepreneurs, helping entrepreneurs. One of the things about Startup Grind, that I read about your philosophy is, help first. I really do believe this. I believe that most entrepreneurs work that way. And let's just get it to the last, that last 1%.
That's literally why I joined, was because of the values. Victor told me about the values, and I was like, I'm in.
Yeah.
Didn't even need to explain what we're doing, how we're going to do it. Just told me the values, and that's definitely.
And for me, I think that's probably where I'm probably going to focus more of my time in the future. Not because I ever want to retire, but because I have a lot of scars. I have some successes, but it's the scars that really help others more than anything. And if you can help others not have their own scars, or have smaller scars, that's very rewarding, because it all gets back to building something from nothing, right? True entrepreneurs don't do it for money. They don't do it for ego. They do it really to make an impact in a market with some vision that they or their group came up with, and making that real.
So then also saw that you do some wine and olive oil on the side as well?
I do. It's funny because that 2-acre vineyard I had when I was 16, I never let go of that. As a matter of fact, I kept growing that through college, through grad school, through Silicon Valley, and still to this day. So those 2 acres have become more, and I now have a winery. I have an olive company, and I'm a big believer in vertical integration in everything that I do. And actually, I learned that from Steve Jobs. Right? Well, I learned it as a farmer, because you're kind of doing everything, right? And then I saw it in the technology world, really with Steve, in a big way. It was about, if you want the best product, if you want the best experience, control the whole stack. And if you look at the most valuable company in the world today,
Very true.
controls the whole stack.
Also data.
But they're not even exploiting the data yet, right? So that's a whole nother opportunity. But the getting back to the winery and the olive company, I grow my own grapes, I grow my own olives, I have my own winery, I have my own mills, I have my own bottling lines, I have my own retail shop. I'm a really big believer in that. And yeah, so if you're ever in my hometown where I grew up,
You can trade some olive oil.
we can trade some olive oil, we can drink some wine, it's all good.
So I think open up to questions. Does anyone have any questions?
I was curious how you make money off Lyve. There's
So there are two things that are happening. One, there is a device called Lyve Home, where we actually made our first $1 million last year, which was kind of a big deal. Anytime you make your first dollar, it's a really big deal. And there's a lot of other milestones in between your first dollar and your first million. Million's a really big deal. So there are devices that we used to sell directly, now we license. But I announced last month that we are also having a cloud option, and there's different services that we are launching this fall, and that's the core of our business. And there's some other ancillary things that we do with partners, but we work a lot with different partners in the television space, in the storage space, in the phone space, in the carrier space, and even in the camera space. So remember I said, I talked about film, and the equivalent of film is software. If you can get your software, your film everywhere, you can really be that Kodak of the digital era. And so that's been the strategy. You just can't do that overnight. So give me 9 more months.
Anyone else have any questions?
Tim, yeah, you've got a wealth of experience doing startups and being an entrepreneur. If you were, and you were talking about helping others in the future, so you read books, exit strategy, those things, your elevator pitch is the best thing, your market can, whatever. From your experience, you talked about teams, you talked about, the passion.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think are the 2 or 3 most important things that somebody who's doing a startup or an entrepreneur should focus on?
I'll tell you what is the most important thing, and then it's also the most important thing to be flexible on too. But the one thing that I think all startups need to have is a clear vision. Okay, a solid vision. Like, what is it that you're really doing?
Mm-hmm.
Startups that are kind of like, well, we're kind of sort of doing this, and we're kind of doing that. But you got to have that clear vision. You mentioned elevator pitch. Elevator pitch comes from that.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're raising money, if you're recruiting a team, pretty much everything you're doing as a CEO or as a founding team member of a startup, if you have a clear vision, and inside of Lyve, I actually don't call it a vision. I call it more of a guiding light, right? Because it's that light that basically the whole team moves towards, right? If it's clear, if it's crisp, you might have to change it, which is okay, but that makes the team very efficient as well. So everything about the company will be better when that vision or that guiding light of where you're going is clear. And as a CEO, it's incredibly important to always test it. And when I say always, I mean every day, right? Because you can make little tweaks to it along the way. But that, in my opinion, is the most important before anything. But the team can actually help refine it. And speaking of team, just because of that, yes, the team is very important. One thing I learned is that when you find somebody who actually gets excited about the general vision when you're very early on and helps refine it, that's the right team member to hire. If somebody says, I've never done a startup before and I want to experience a startup, tell them that's the door. Okay. Yes, I get it. Some people haven't done a startup, but those who haven't done a startup, if you want to join a startup, make sure you join one that you actually believe in that guiding light and then contribute to it. So it's kind of like the Uber, it's like the first commandment of, in my opinion, of of what people should focus on who are thinking of doing a startup or joining a startup.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Actually got one. Starting to see kind of, like the Zappos model of management. Do you see that becoming taken on by more larger companies or just startups in general? I know that in one of my new companies we're going to try and test it out, but I'm just wondering if you see that or know of any other entrepreneurs or CEOs in the Valley that are.
Thank you for asking that question, because one of the things that I also wanted to mention in terms of my experiences with startups, when it comes to management philosophy, when it comes to culture, there are people that have joined startups that I've been involved with or have done, and they've asked me, what kind of culture are you creating? And I always pause when somebody asks me that. And by the way, I have this policy of always interviewing everybody that I'm interested in. And it's funny, but unfortunately, quite a few people ask me that question when I'm interviewing them. And you can't actually create a culture. Okay? The best cultures are the ones that organically grow, that organically come up, okay? Because they're the ones that will hold the longest. So I think you have to be very careful with a company that says, I want to adopt, the Zappos model, or I want to adopt the Microsoft model, or whatever it might be. I think you have to find your own. Really important, and you have to really make sure that it grows from within. And it's not trying. As a CEO, you're just kind of putting up guardrails, but you're going to see it.
Yeah.
You always have to pay attention to it, but you got to foster the culture. Don't make the culture. And then as you foster it and it becomes solid, that becomes your culture, that becomes your company style, that becomes the management philosophy. I don't believe you can take one and stamp it to every other company. As a matter of fact, I've tried that and I failed. So now I kind of let it happen.
Yeah.
I watch it carefully, I guide it, I nudge it. And, you still have to have your core values, right? But then all the new people contribute to that culture.
Do you think that the people are asking that question because of larger companies' cultures that already exist, like Google and free food and everything?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, sometimes there's, but you see, even with those cultures, right? How did that happen? It's not like, Larry and Sergey said, I read this company was giving free meals. They probably had a friend who had somebody who cooked, and he or she would start making meals, in the garage or whatever, however it started, and it became part of the culture, but it grew organically. So always be careful with that. Now, unfortunately, in Silicon Valley, some of those cultural things are expectations. And that's some of the bad stuff, in my opinion, of Silicon Valley. Because you really have to join a company, start a company, and be yourself, and be confident enough to be yourself. So it's a very interesting. I could talk all night just about that one area of management philosophy, of culture, of how do you do that? Who do you what books do you read?
Yeah.
You know what I do when I give talks at universities in their business schools? I ask the question. I say, how many of you read books about company cultures and great leaders and everything? And the whole class raises their hand. And I said, okay, throw them all away, because I don't believe in any of them. Do I read them? Yes, I read them, but I really don't try to ascribe to them.
Yeah, it's more kind of taking the best of all of it. Do you ever watch Silicon Valley?
Love it.
All right.
Richard's my favorite character, because he's really good.
Very good.
I love engineers. Okay, he's a geeky engineer.
Yeah, it's very funny and close to home. So, anyone else have any more questions? All right, let's give Tim a good round of hand. Thank you very much.
All right, thanks, Pete.
Thank you. Guys, I know there's probably some questions. Usually there's always questions after.
Sure.
Is the camera on?
Yeah, those are the real questions.
Not what you really think.
Cool, that's awesome.
All right. Yeah, anybody have any other questions? Anybody doing a startup? Anybody thinking of a startup?
Yeah.
What's that?
Just soaking it all in.
Yeah. How many of you have done a startup, are in a startup, are thinking of a startup?
I'm working in one now.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, yeah. How many people are there?
5 employees right now.
Okay. Do you go up to Oregon every once in a while?
I make one trip, but it's all phone calls. Like I do 6 phone calls with the guys up there every day.
Yeah. Could you spend some time with the crew up there? Here's where I'm getting at. Well, early on in the startup, it's really important. You know how I've seen a lot of companies start virtually. I haven't seen many successful companies continue virtually.
Mhm.
I think those early days, it's really important to bond with the rest of the team. So, for example, if you could spend a week up there and just do your work from up there in Deep Soak,
Yeah.
it's not that far to drive.
Yeah, it's a long drive. I'd rather fly. But no, I think our CEO is actually a really good driver of that because every time we get together as a company on the phone, we'll probably spend 30 minutes, even sometimes as much as an hour, just chatting before we even get to that
Yeah.
topic of the discussion. So,
He's smart or she's smart because it's in the early days. It's really important.
so yeah, I know a lot about them, even though I've only met them in person 3 or 4 times now.
Yeah. You know what the biggest mistake, and not the biggest, but a big mistake that first-time CEOs do?
What?
They try not to be human.
Just business professional.
Yeah, I'm the
Career?
CEO, and I'm going to do this, and we're going to pull together. Like if something really bad happened to your family or something, like tell people. It actually shows that you're human and that you have compassion, and it really makes a difference. That team can become really, really tight. By the way, I used to be the machine. Now I'm a machine with a little bit of care. No, a lot of care. I was just kidding. I'm very, very compassionate about that. So I really, I'm genuine about it too. Like I really want to understand, more about the individuals, especially early on when you're just a few. Yeah, and you can help one another better that way by understanding each other's situation. Yeah.
So I worked for a solar company, a friend of mine started it. And his team's kind of built around kind of the convenience of being able to work with them and kind of keep it on a lower budget. But some of them usually don't perform up to where they should be, and they kind of take advantage of the situation because it's kind of like a more a friendly type thing.
Yep.
You mean advice on how to do that?
Yeah, cut early. It's a really important thing to do because what happens is he or she, whoever is leading the company, might not see that or might not think it's bad because it's a very close friend, let's say. But the peers, the other people in the company see that. And what it does, remember that culture thing we were talking about? It starts this seed of that's an acceptable thing to do kind of culture. And what happens then is that company will not be successful. I'm not saying your company won't be, but if you don't nip that in the butt, like really early on, it can actually spiral out of control faster than you can imagine, especially when the company is doing well. Sounds weird, right? But that's when you're growing, and then you're having to like hire a lot more, and you're not being scrappy, and then you finally hit a roadblock, which is like, oh, we're out of money, and we didn't actually accomplish our milestones, or whatever the case may be. Yeah, that's a hard one to do, and that's when I was first, my first startup. It was hard to fire someone. It still is hard. It's always hard, but I really believe it's the right thing to do, and I've had to let several people go, even in the current company. I just take action faster now than I used to.
And do you think that's just because of the stuff that you've gone through, or is it
Totally. Totally, because you know the impact if you don't take action sooner. So it's like, okay, it's time to, yeah. I had a recent one in the current company, no names will be named, but this person ran half of the engineering team. One of the nicest guys in the world. Turns out what's happened since is the person who took over everything completely you know, he wasn't ready for that. He is kicking so much butt. It's just changed everything, and the efficiencies have just gone through the roof. So it's not an easy thing to do.